Councillor Walker today. No further apologies reported to me at this stage. Therefore, I'll return to the chair so we can invite declarations of interest from yourselves. Thank you.
Are there any declarations of interest? No. Item 2, minutes of the last meeting on pages 4 to 15. Can I refer members to pages 4 to 8 of the agenda, which comprise the minutes of our last meeting as held on the 30th of November 2021. Are the minutes agreed? Thank you. Item 3, urgent business.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to advise we have no urgent business to deal with today, so therefore we will move straight on to today's applications for determination, starting with agenda item 4, which relates to numbers 33 to 55 Parr Street, Liverpool 1, located in Riverside Ward. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mike. Can I welcome Julian Dennis, Graham Middleton and Steve McFarlane, who's here to answer any questions if any members of the committee have got any questions. But Julian Dennis is the architect and Graham Middleton is the agent. So Julian or Graham, if you'd like to start and give us the presentation in relation to this application. Thank you.
Am I live? Hello?
You're live now.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. My name is Julian Dennis. I'll be presenting this. This application is in support of a proposal for the redevelopment of the site at number 33 to 55 Parr Street in order to create a mixed-use development comprising of over 1,000 square meters of commercial space and 8 units apart. All face Parr Street with their entrances located onto it and are serviced by a narrow alleyway at the back known as Back Seal Street, which also services a number of bars and clubs on the opposite side. Next slide, please. There are 6 commercial units being proposed facing Parr Street and Back Colquitt Street. 3 of them are single-story units and 3 of them are duplex units with mezzanines onto the first floor. The upper levels are mainly residential, with 70 residential apartments being proposed in a mix of 1, 2 and 3 bed apartments, and a 8 units apart hotel element shown in light blue on the first and second floor. There are a number of setbacks, as you can see on the 5th and the 6th level, enabling the proposal to relate to the height of surrounding buildings. We're also proposing that the servicing of the development will be facilitated by Back Seal Street with a on the first and second floor operating 24 hours. There are a number of setbacks, as you can see on the 5th and the 6th, for both the commercial and residential elements. Next slide, please. It was decided early in the process, in consultation with the planning department, that the scheme should be broken down into a number of plots and not dealt with as a single entity, as is more characteristic of the row works where plots aren't so large. Subsequently, it became the applicant's wish to phase the development so that construction could be started in sections. So phase one is the internal remodeling and two-storey rooftop extension of the existing former warehouse at number 35-41. Phase two is for the demolition of the existing first floor deck at number 33 and erection of a 6-storey building. Phase three is for the demolition of the existing single-storey structure at number 43-45 and erection of a 7-storey building. Phase 4 is for the demolition of the existing 2-storey building at 47-55 and erection of a 6-storey mixed-use building on the corner with back Colquitt Street. It is intended that Phase 1, 2 and 3 will be completed together, whilst Phase 4 could follow at a later date, and some anticipated start dates for each of the phases are planned as follow. Phase 1 would be 2022, Phase 2 and 3 would be 2023, and Phase 4 would be 2024. Next slide, please. So just to wrap up, and as summarised by the feedback received by Historic England, this scheme basically addresses Parr Street and turns the corner onto back Colquitt Street, and the design proposal aims to create a harmonious relationship with its context by reinforcing the existing street pattern and replicating the vertical emphasis of the Georgian warehouses and the housing which surrounds it. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Julian. Does Graham Middleton want to address the committee at this stage?
No, not at this point.
Okay. Do members have any questions for the architect? I can't see any hands up. So can I ask our team leader for the city centre to address the committee and take us through and summarise this application, please? Fergal?
Chair, thank you very much. Fergal McAvoy, team leader for City Centre Development Management Team. Good morning, members. You've got a very detailed report in front of you today, and you've also kind of listened to a very informative presentation by the architect. The development site is within Duke Street Conservation Area, and it also sits in close proximity to a number of Grade 2 listed buildings. There's been significant objections to the application, which are detailed within the report. These include objections from 3 ward councillors, 186 individual objections, together with objections from Liverpool City Region Music Board, Kim Johnson, MP, Liverpool Sam City, the head of Faculty of Music at the University of Oxford, and the Friends of Parr Street Studio. The application has been with ourselves for a considerable amount of time, and during that time, significant alterations have been made to the application. The overall scale of the development has been reduced from 7 stories when it was first submitted to a height of between 5 and 6 stories. The number of apartments have been reduced from 114 to 70, and the number of hotel units have been reduced from 36 to 8 units. So all the apartments meet a nationally described space standards, and all the rooms within the hotel are compliant in terms of inclusive design, provision for wheelchair accessible and ambulant disabled. So as it stands, the proposal involves the construction over 1,000 square metres of commercial development on the ground and mezzanine floor, the provision of 70 apartments split between 32 one-bed, 32 bed and 8 3-bed apartments, which would be for over floors 2 to 6, and the provision of 8 apart hotel rooms. So I've outlined the objections received from members of the public and a number of statutory consultees. The significant number of objections largely related to the loss of Parr Street Studios, a kind of world famous recording studios which sat within the building. That planning permission, since this application was first submitted, planning permission has subsequently been granted for the relocation of Parr Street Studios to Kempson Street, which is in the Fabric District, and this is ongoing. And you will note within your notes today that the operators of Parr Street Studios do not actually support the application. They acknowledge the fact that they hadn't got funding in situ to purchase the building or refurbish it, but as I said, provision has been made for the relocation of that facility. So the two main objections that still remain are from the heritage specialist and the urban design specialist. Both of them recognise that due to the overall height and scale of the building, there would be a level of harm which is less than substantial to the surrounding heritage assets. Now, as I said, officers have secured a number of significant amendments to the overall scale and height of the development. However, the applicants have said that the scheme is on the margins of viability, and any further reductions in the overall height would accept the impact on the viability. So we're left in a situation where I think there's holding objections from heritage and urban design. And what within a chapter of 11 of your report in front of you today, the planning officer assessed the kind of public benefits that arise from the scheme and consideration of the planning balance, i.e. so when the level of harm is less than substantial, and you've got to set within the MPPF, you've got to weigh the level of harm against the stated public benefits of the development. How also within the NPPF there's a recognition that the significance of the designated heritage assets should be given additional weight, irrespective of whether the level of harm is substantial or less than substantial in this case. There is a number of regeneration benefits. Currently the building is unoccupied. There's very level on street level. There's very dead street frontage. So part of the development involves the conversion of some parts of it together with new building. There's significant economic and regeneration benefits arising from this development. So your officers are satisfied, albeit it is marginal, and there is an acknowledgement that there will be an impact both on Duke Street Conservation Area and the surrounding heritage assets. However, it does bring a number of buildings back into use, and we're comfortable with the scale of it, that it can sit within the locality without causing significant level of harm to, as I said, those designated heritage assets. The report also goes through a whole range of issues. I think it covers 11 separate issues within, ranging from the principle of development, the overall scale and development, impact on heritage assets, impact on environmental amenity, together with a range of issues which are detailed in great detail in front of the report. So we are satisfied that this scheme is acceptable. The applicants are paying a full Section 106 full Section 106 contribution, £220,000. There's been a significant correspondence between the applicants and the consultant at the City Council using terms of viability. The applicants originally requested that they pay no contribution. However, we are satisfied that this scheme can deliver a full contribution of £220,000. So it's recommended for approval subject to the Section 106 agreement and the stated conditions. So if members have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Okay, thanks, Virgil. Do members have any questions? Well, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Prince, then Councillor Cardwell, then Councillor.
Thank you. This is a question for Fergal, but possibly also for the developers. Quite a few of the neighbour objections state that there's been no meaningful consultation. I just wondered what has, I know there has been some consultation. Could you talk us through what happened by way of consultation, please?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Well, from a local planning authority point of view, we engaged, we erected site notices, advertised the scheme in the press, and we've been subject to 2 separate rounds of consultation with adjoining occupiers and the kind of the wider area. I think the level of objections received do suggest that the level of consultation has been significant. I also note that the applicants, maybe they wish to elaborate on this, also did a kind of pre-submission round of consultation. However, due to COVID, it's my understanding that this was online as opposed to kind of in an open session, but perhaps they'd like to elaborate on that further.
Okay, thanks, Fergal. Okay, Councillor Thompson, yeah. Councillor Plea.
Unless the developer has anything to add in terms of their consultation.
Okay, I mean, Julian or...
Sorry, yes, am I back on?
Could you respond to that question in relation to the consultation?
We have submitted as part of the application the statement of community involvement, which basically details the public consultation event which was held in April. Basically that was done through a website due to COVID-19 restrictions being in place. The response from that was pretty small. I mean, we had 2 responses, I think. But the scale of the exercise was basically a website went up and we sent out letters to neighbouring properties and basically just went through a process which is all detailed in the community involvement statement that was submitted. So I would suggest that that's the document to consult.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I went to a meeting a week or so ago in which it was said that another British city, which had also been capital of culture, had lost the benefits of that because they hadn't kept on investing in culture. And my question is, and it's one for members to think about, over this one, if we demolish what is clearly a building of cultural significance and move it somewhere else, will that diminish our cultural offer or not? That's basically the question, I think.
Would you like to answer that, Fergal?
Okay, thanks, Chair. Well, as I said in my presentation, I suppose the main cultural offering within the building previously was the internationally renowned Parr Street recording studios, and that has been relocated elsewhere in the city. So it's kind of the future's been safeguarded. There are no policies either within the kind of unitary development plan or the local plan which would have allowed us to recommend refusal of this application on the loss of a kind of culture offering like the recording studios. But that's why the application has been around a significant period of time. So in the interim period, an application has been submitted, been assessed and approved for the relocation of Parr Street studios elsewhere in the city. And with significant objections at the outset of the application, which I outlined at the outset. None of those objectors requested to attend the planning committee. However, out of a duty of kind of care, we did invite them to attend. All the significant objectors have been notified of that the application is being considered today. However, none of them have chosen to turn up. I don't know if that if there's any significance to that. I would have been far more concerned if Parr Street Studios were to go to the wall, but it's not the instance in this case. Said to being relocated elsewhere in the city.
Okay, thanks, Fergal. I don't know if that answers your question, John, but
I do have a second one, if I can ask that. The second issue raised was about the height of the proposed building, in that on the original landscape there was one outstanding historic building in the true historic sense, which was taller than all the other buildings, and that's why it was significant. These proposed buildings are, I think, of equal height to that one outstanding building, and that was mentioned in the objections as well.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Yeah, officers during the course of the application, they've negotiated a reduction in the scale of height of the building from 7 stories to kind of part 5 stories, part 6 stories, and they've also ensured that the level of accommodation within the development is far more generous in terms of kind of room sizes than was first proposed. Yes, there is still a degree of concern, though objections have been outlined from the heritage specialist and the urban design specialist, although I would stress that Historic England are supportive of the amended scheme. So as I said, it's a carefully balanced recommendation. The applicants have said they cannot make any more amendments to the scheme and reducing the kind of height further. So it is a case of, yes, there are concerns. The level of harm to the adjoining listed building and other heritage assets within the locality is less than substantial, and we've got to consider the impact on those heritage assets against the redevelopment of this site and bringing kind of formal previously occupied buildings back into use.
thanks, Fergal. Councillor Cardwell.
Hi, I've got 2 questions, and I think, if you like, firstly, the first one follows on from something that Councillor Prince talked about, which is the relocation of Parr Street Studios. The chap from Oxford University, and I can't remember the person's name, talked about the kind of the acoustics and what makes that building unique. So my question is, merely moving it up to the Fabric District, is that something that's then lost forever in terms of that unique acoustics? And then the second one, which I guess follows on from that, is in Kim Johnson's objections, she talks about trying a reapplication for asset of community value. Should we not be waiting until after that application is processed, you know, before we give permission for this to go ahead, to see whether that actually happens or not? Because I guess those two things are related. You can't just replicate a recording studios by moving it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cardwell. Yeah, you make two valid points, and yeah, I think I'm no music or acoustic expert, but reading through the application documents, one of the significant values of the existing Parr Street Studios was the kind of large open spaces and the fact that kind of full orchestra or significant amount of musicians could record at the same time. Yes, so that will be lost, and the accommodation, the new studios on Kempson Street, they're not as big, so I assume they will not be able to provide the same level of different types of recording that were within Parr Street Studios. However, within your report, the existing owners of Parr Street Studios say they are supportive of this application. I suppose the fact is they were there as leaseholders. They were given the opportunity to purchase the building, the cost of the purchase of the building, and the refurbishment of the existing studios. They couldn't meet those, so they had to take a commercial decision to locate elsewhere in the city. In relation to asset of community value, that is addressed in the report. An application for an asset of community value was submitted during the course of the application, and this was rejected. This is outside the kind of planning framework. So that is detailed in the report that said it is not considered an asset of community value. So our assessment and recommendation does not prejudice that. Thank you.
Thanks, Fergal. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. Just first off, because I was going to make a similar point to Councillor Prince, so I support the comments that we are very definitely going to lose part of our cultural colour to the city. In the Parr Street studios, very fondly remembered by a lot of people. So we're definitely going to lose that. And my concern really is about the scale and the massing of this project, because it is a huge block there. As I think of Parr Street now, the area in general is quite open, and I'm concerned about the scale of this overshadowing the many streets that surround it. We rejected an application recently because it was incongruous to its surroundings. And I know I hear what you said about limiting the project because of viability. But we heard that one as well recently. We heard a claim that the project couldn't be reduced any further for viability reasons. But I'm just concerned that the overall scale of this dwarfs everything around it. And my final sort of question in the end is, whilst we're losing that bit of culture that we had in Parr Street, what do we feel that this development is actually returning to the area in terms of cultural contribution? Is there anything about it that will ultimately lend itself to the overall culture and look of the city?
Okay, Chair, thank you very much. I would reiterate what I've said previously, is that Parr Street Studios, they're relocating to different parts of the city. Yes, the type of recording studios or the type of bands or artists that can record there will probably be reduced somewhat. But within the report is the existing owners of Parr Street Studios say they're supportive of the scheme. They're relocating to elsewhere in the city into a building that they have control of their own destiny. They're not just in there as tenants of an existing landowner. So it's not as if the recording studios are being lost to the city elsewhere. They still remain in situ. Mike, I don't know if you'll be able to go back to the CGI, the presentation in terms, so I can show members again the overall scale and massing of development. I don't know if that's possible. Thank you. If you just move it on. So there, Councillor Lake, you can see, yeah, Mike, if you hold that image, the development is subject. You've got buildings from single-story buildings to buildings that are three stories in height. It's kind of a variety of building designs and scales. Mike, if you move on to the next slide, please. And again, I think there's a CGI that shows, yeah, okay. So immediately on the right-hand side, you'll see 57 Parr Street, which is a 5-story listed building. So that's the kind of highest datum level along Parr Street. And immediately the left-hand side, there's a really small kind of MOT garage that's about 2 stories in height. So as it stands, there are significantly different datum levels of height along Parr Street. Yes, this would be the highest building along this stretch of Parr Street. It would be higher than anything that is there previously. The design of the building that you can see in front of you, it's been designed in such a way that there's a number of setbacks. It would still read as 3 or 4 individual design buildings as opposed to one monolith block. In terms of impact on surrounding buildings, the large chapter within your report that deals with residential and the environmental impact of development on surrounding buildings. So we're satisfied that the height of the building is of a scale that is appropriate in this location. Although it is a marginal decision, we have got it reduced considerably from what was first submitted. We would probably have sought to get it reduced somewhat more, but the applicants are adamant that this is the scheme. Any further reduction would make the development unviable, and so based on that, we're in a situation where there are concerns from a number of urban design and your kind of historic specialists. There are regeneration benefits from the redevelopment of this site. So ultimately, Council Lake, the decision rests with you and members of the planning committee. If you're concerned that the building is still too high for the location, you can request that officers go back and secure further negotiations, or try to secure further negotiations with the applicant. I don't know if the agent or the architect wants to kind of discuss further in terms of what further reductions in scale would impact in terms of the viability of this development. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Fergal. Can I bring in now Councillor Maloney, please?
Thanks, Chair. I'm not going to repeat, but I do share the concerns that have been mentioned about the scale of development and also the loss or potential loss of musical and creative heritage and asset to the city. But I would like to go into some more detail about the parking provision for this development. I note it says in Section 5.2, the future occupants will be making a conscious decision and lifestyle choice for city centre living where private vehicles are not essential and where they wouldn't get parking permits for the city centre. Whilst I wouldn't agree wholeheartedly with that. I think it's somewhat naive. I think what it does ignore is in those 70 apartments, people are going to visit residents of those apartments. There are going to be deliveries, and given that it'll be city centre living, I think there'll be Amazon vans going up and down Parr Street every day delivering to the residents, and I think that will have an effect on the highway infrastructure in the area. And I would also say on Section 5.4, I don't agree that this development would not generate a level of traffic that would have any material impact on the city. So I do think that, again, the impact of parking and modern living and vehicle ownership is not being considered, and the detrimental effects of this lack of consideration is having on both the economic development of the city and also the amenity of the residents of this development and the surrounding area. Thanks, Chair.
I can see Andy Dingwall, our highways officer, is willing to come in and maybe comment on the points that you've raised, Councillor Maloney. Andy?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Andy Dingwall, Highways Development Control Team Leader. this is a city centre location. It doesn't get any better than this, really, in terms of, accessibility to shops, facilities, public transport. It's all on the doorstep. So any residents moving in won't be reliant on having to own and use a car to get about. Everything is there for them right on the doorstep. So we're really comfortable with the fact that this is a completely car-free development. There's significant area of secure cycle storage within the ground floor of the building, which gives people the option to use bikes if they so choose, and to keep them secure and available for use. It's typical of a city centre development where car parking isn't required. If there are residents who have visitors, then those visitors can travel into the city centre by sustainable modes, public transport. They can walk, they can cycle, and if they do have the need to travel into the city centre by car, then there are several options close by for secure parking areas. There's multi-storey car parks, short walk away as well. So there are options for people to visit by car if they so choose to do so. With the likes of deliveries from, say, for example, Amazon, or grocery deliveries from one of the large food suppliers. Again, those deliveries can be made from Parr Street. The restrictions that exist in Parr Street is effectively a single yellow line, which means that there's no parking allowed there during the daytime, but that loading and unloading is permitted. And then after 6 p.m, on-street car parking can take place in the city centre, where there is a single yellow line. So we're comfortable with this development not having any provision for off-street car parking, given its location and given that there's a whole range of alternative modes that people can use to travel to and from the development. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Andy. Councillor Hanson.
Excuse me, thanks, Chair. Fergal, on page 24, impact upon the World Heritage Site buffer zone, it goes on to it needs to respond and reflect, I'm quoting the report, the characteristics of the area around them. Yeah, and then you look at the mass of the building, which is going to actually dominate that particular area. So I don't understand how you get around that mass and how that building is going to dominate the area. So, because you're quoting it needs to respond and reflect the characteristics of the area around them. And the second point is in terms of the cultural impact that the demolition of this building will have. We've seen lots and lots of statements, comments from people who are in the cultural industry, in the cultural business, and so their opinion seems to fly in the face of the planning officer's opinion when the cultural impact in people who work in that industry are saying it's going to have a massive impact, and yet we as a planning team seems to be ignoring that professional advice and guidance.
Okay, Councillor Hanson, thanks very much for that. I don't think I would say the complete opposite. We're not ignoring the advice. Those objections were submitted at the outset of the application. The application was submitted well over 12 months ago. In the interim period, we've secured a relocation of Parr Street Studio, which is the main culture offering within that existing building. Elsewhere in the city, we've safeguarded their future and ensured that they're in control of their own destiny moving forward. As I said at the outset, we contacted each of those main objectors that you've just referred to. We've given them the opportunity to attend and reiterate their objections that they made at the outset of the application today. None of those people have taken up that opportunity. In terms of dominating that stretch of Parr Street, yes, the surrounding buildings are from 2 stories in height to 5 stories in height. So that stretch of Parr Street, yeah, it's different, of different scales. It will be the highest building in the area on that stretch of Parr Street. Further down Parr Street towards Liverpool 1, there's buildings of kind of for greater scale. It will be the highest building in that stretch. I don't think it will dominate the skyline. There's buildings in close proximity that are even higher. And during the course of the application, we put in a significant amount of work to reduce the overall scale of the buildings. As I said, we're at a situation here. The applicant said they can't reduce the overall scale any further. However, as officers, we are satisfied that this scale is appropriate for this stretch of Parr Street, and that's why we've recommended for approval.
Okay, thanks, Fergal. I mean, a number of members have asked the question in relation to the Parr Street studios themselves, and we do have the current owner, Steve McFarland, and I notice he's had his hand up. Steve, would you like to maybe address some of the concerns that members of the committee have in relation to Parr Street studios?
Sure, you know, just before starting, I recognise that there is a history in relation to the building. I think we all do. It's maybe worth just making sure the members are aware that we have tried for almost 10 years to find a purchaser that would take on the building as a going concern, and that included us working over the last couple of years with the Friends of Parr Street in seeking something that would have been a viable alternative to what you have before you know. Added to that, just again, it's maybe helpful to give some context. We went from a building that initially at its start housed 5 recording studios down to 1 recording studio, whilst still having to maintain the rest of a 22,000 square foot building with that 1 studio. And maybe my final point to everyone is we were very conscious that we wanted to try and help the existing business running the recording business to continue and to be able to sustain themselves going forward. And in doing so, we've been hugely supportive of them, and they will be taking some of the equipment with them to their new facility. They had expressed over 2 years ago a desire to immediately have an asset of their own that they would ultimately own, and something that would give them the advantage in being able to put in the very latest high-end technology within a space that they have purpose-built.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Cardwell, did you want to ask another question?
No, it's okay. Councillor Hanson stole my thunder.
Yeah, okay. Are there any other questions or comments from members? No. Obviously, we've had a quite detailed presentation. There's been a lot of questions and concerns raised. But the amended scheme, as I see it, would provide wider benefits for the public benefit. Obviously, there's some concerns in relation to scale and heritage, but those concerns have been acknowledged. And as I say, there's wider public benefits that would accrue from this. We've just heard from the owner of the Parr Street Studios that they tried for many years to try and make sure that it remains where it is, but it hasn't been possible. So therefore, can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Any members wishing to move amendments in relation to the Chair's motion? If so, please do so now and invite a seconder. No indications? In which case I'll move to the vote. Chair, your vote on the recommendation.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney.
Abstain.
Thank you. And Councillor Billy Lake.
Against.
Thank you. That concludes the voting on the application. The voting is 5 members in favour, 2 members voting against, Councillors Prince and Lake, and 1 abstention, Councillor Maloney. The application is therefore carried on that basis, and expressions of dissent and abstention will be recorded individually for those members concerned. We'll therefore move on to our next item of business, number 5 on today's agenda, which relates to the service car park at former LMA Building, land at 73 to 83, 85 to 89 Duke Street, and 4 to 8 Parr Street, Liverpool 1 again.
Thanks, Mike. Could I ask Colin Williams, who's the agent, and we also have Gemma Birchall, the architect, if they'd like to present to the committee this application, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, excellent. I'll get the architect to say a few words over the slides because they're better placed than I am for that. It may well not be Gemma, it might be a colleague, Danielle McFarland, who has done most of the architectural work anyway, so she's well placed to take you through the scheme. Okay, I'll pass you over. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, and apologies for the last minute change of personnel. I'm Danielle McFarland with Tim Green Architects, and we've been working on this scheme for a number of years with Iliad. So the first slide here is just to introduce the site in relation to Liverpool. So we're in the ropeworks area, it's in the Duke Street conservation area, and it's worth noting that the developer Iliad has brought forward a number of schemes in the area in recent years, and that this area is identified for mixed use in the LLP and in various SPDs. So moving to the next slide. The site also has a change in level of about 2 metres from Duke Street at the lowest point, Parr Street at the higher point, and there's also about 1 metre across the frontage of the site on Duke Street. So moving to the next slide. The proposal itself has been the subject of quite detailed pre-app involvement, resulting in the scheme within this application, which is a hotel use, mixed use at ground level, a commercial unit to the southeast corner of Wolstenholme Square, activating that part of the square. The hotel itself has got dual access, so we're treating Duke Street as the primary entry, accessing the hotel lobby, lounges, co-working spaces. We are using Parr Street as the secondary entrance and also the service entrance, which is repeating the current use of the site. So the back of the LMA building, which is the service access from Parr Street, will undergo the same use in the proposed building. So there's back of house and plant areas to that side of the scheme. We then have a number of apart hotel floors with a range of room types. We're including 5% fully accessible rooms, a further 5% are ambient accessible, and we have one room that will have full hoist in there. The elevations here are illustrating in part the changes that we've been subject to through the pre-app process, which has been a reduction in scale. So significant reduction from Duke Street. And moving to the next slide, please. There's an illustration of the massing. So top left diagrams show an original scheme varying from 5 to 8 stories. We reduced that massing and reduced the number of hotel rooms in the middle proposal. And the latest changes are a significant reduction in massing on Parr Street and an overall reduction in the building height on Duke Street. So we have a Duke Street bottom left image, introduction of a consistent ground floor datum across the site, which follows the site topography. The images to the right, Parr Street looking from Wilson Home Square. The reduction in massing there has gone from 8 stories overall to 6 stories on its lowest corner, where it addresses the square and sits next to the Clockworks building. And the photograph there shows the former warehouse that occupied the proposal site, which is the full 5-story red brick warehouse, which was demolished post-war. So we've used that to inform the massing that we're presenting on Parr Street today. And moving on to the final slide. Showing the representations from Parr Street, both previously submitted scheme and the current scheme. Looking at that relationship from the massing of the proposal on the corner, stepping down to the Clockworks. So we've done a number of moves in the facade to open up to the Clockworks building and to show more respect to that square. And on Duke Street, sorry, I've lost the image. Duke Street also showing the reduction in massing, and some of the recent changes involve materiality to ground floor, where we've brought in some of the high quality materials, detailing, and some of the finer details that respond to the 105 Duke Street building in terms of generating the overall character of the building. So that concludes the design presentation. If Colin would like to take over.
Thank you, Danielle. I'd just like to take you through just a few of the main issues, because you have got a full report, which is actually very balanced and well written. The scheme actually started off from very early pre-application discussions with Iliad and with a hotel operator who stayed with the scheme for the last 2 years, even through pandemic and through a number of amendments.
Great turn. To turn this camera off, please, until you're brought in to speak to the committee. Thank you.
Right, can you hear me? Can I carry on?
Carry on.
Thank you. I forgot where I was getting to anyway. But anyway, this scheme is tied to a tenant, and this is the first scheme up north. And so Iliad have been working hard to try and manage their expectations in terms of dealing with a difficult site in the conservation area. But actually part of the area, that, as you've seen from the slides and from your knowledge of this part of Duke Street and Parr Street, we're entering down to Wilson Home Square, we're going down towards Liverpool 1, and the scale and the townscape is completely different to what the previous scheme was looking at further up Parr Street. We kind of got to a point where the amendments, I think, are a fair balance between what is required in terms of making it an operational scheme for Room 2 to take on and work with the architects. It's a scheme that I think reflects and respects the conservation area and the adjacent listed buildings. The report tells you that we've dealt with the demolition of the LMA building, which is an unlisted building in the conservation area, and for a number of reasons, regrettably, it could not be included within the scheme, nor could the a possible facade retention. The development will offer a mixed-use scheme and just hotel and bar and restaurants and a retail unit. We've dealt with a number of key issues coming through the committee, inclusive design being one of them. There's 10% disabled and ambulant disabled spaces within the hotel. There's electric vehicle points, car parking within the car park. And there's a significant regeneration benefits and economic benefits which are before you in the report. So I hope on the basis of the report you've got before you and what you've heard, that you will accept your officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you.
Okay, Colin. Can I ask members if they've got any questions for Colin or Gemma? No? Okay, can I invite Callum McMaster, who wants to speak against this application? He's a representative of the Clockworks. Callum?
Chair, it will appear that Mr McMaster is not present today. Anybody has, however, been extended to him to attend and address committee. What I would highlight and draw some members' attention, the particular issues to be raised by Mr McMaster related to the impacts of the application on adjacent developments and commercial activities, such as to impact their ongoing viability and commercial operation. So those are the comments which are principally going to be raised. Thank you.
Okay, Mike, thanks for that clarification. Given the fact that Mr McMaster is not here now, can I ask our case officer, the team leader for Central City, to take us through this application and then ask members if they've got any questions? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually me that will be presenting this application at Felicity Collins. I've been the case officer for this scheme. So thank you for the presentation there. I think that's a fairly detailed run through of the scheme, and members, you have in front of you a detailed report with the officer's assessment, which covers the assessment of the proposal, but also the amendments that have been secured to the scheme through negotiations with the developer. I think you've had the background to the proposal is the hotel development with a ground floor commercial unit, which is adjacent to the Clockworks building, and involves a gap site really, which is a surface car park, but which sits between Duke Street and Parr Street, and the 1950s building, which is the extension to a Grade 2 listed union newsroom. So as our objector hasn't joined the meeting, I'll just run through the main objections that we've had to the application. Really, the objections from the Clockworks building primarily relate to the impact that the scale and massing of this building would have on their business and on the building, which is smaller than the proposed scheme. We had fairly detailed conversations with the architect and their agent about the scale and massing, and as you've seen from the architect's presentation, there's been quite a reduction in scale and also some additional detailing in terms of fenestration and materials detailing to try and soften the impact of the proposal on the corner. But I think there's a balance really that's been thought to be achieved here, as the rest of Wolstenholme Square has already been redeveloped. There are a number of new buildings around the edge of the square which are 6 stories and upwards, and unfortunately that means that the Clockworks building is the remaining building that sits at sort of 3-4 stories in height. So this building, although we had sought to kind of try to negotiate a slightly lower building height, I think officers are comfortable that what's now proposed has gone as far as it can, while still achieving operationally what the hotel needs to achieve, in reducing the mass to something that is appropriate for the context and framing the corner of Wolstenholme Square and responding to the additional newer development on the other side of the square and Parr Street. In terms of other considerations that have been principal in this assessment is the demolition of the LMA building. We've had a number of discussions with the agent and the applicant about that, and there's been some objections received, as well as the petition online, which didn't come into planning, but we are aware of that. Obviously, this is a wider site, and there's a large proportion of the site that doesn't contribute positively to the conservation area, but the frontage to Duke Street replicates the style of the listed newsrooms, and so does make a positive contribution to the conservation area at present. The building behind that is more of a utilitarian warehouse building. So on the Parr Street side and within the site, that building doesn't respond to or make a positive contribution to the conservation area. So we're really talking about the facade. In the application material submitted, there was some structural survey information and some options that were worked through to try to consider retention of that building and incorporation into the hotel scheme. Unfortunately, because of the levels within the building and the complications structurally of refurbishing that building to a level that would be suitable for a hotel, it wasn't deemed to be an option that they wanted to pursue. So in that instance, we're then looking at weighing the balance of the loss of that building, which makes a positive contribution, against the benefits of the wider redevelopment of the site. And as you'll see in my report, the officers have concluded that the advice that we've had from Heritage consultees, Historic England, and our own conservation officers, that there is harm through the loss of this building, but the level of that harm is less than substantial. And in that case, we look to the guidance of the MPPF, which allow for the benefits of the scheme to be weighed against the harm. And here, where we are redeveloping the wider gap site with a comprehensive, high-quality hotel design, which is a use that's appropriate to this area within the rope walks, fully compliant in terms of the principle and the nature of the use, that the benefits in this case would outweigh the harm in that respect. Just looking at any other aspects of the scheme, the report covers obviously the principle of use, the heritage impact. The architect picked up in the presentation there that the design is fully compliant in terms of provision of accessible bedroom accommodation, and there's level access throughout. There were some concerns raised in objections in relation to residential amenity, because obviously there are residential developments on the other side of Parr Street around Wolstenholme Square, which directly face this development. And Parr Street is not a particularly wide street, but given that this is a city centre location, and given that these would be hotel bedrooms, which have a slightly different impact in terms of being transient occupation, not permanent residential accommodation, we're comfortable that the interface distances here are not dissimilar to what you'd find anywhere else in the city centre, and so wouldn't preclude the development of the height and massing that is being proposed. In relation to parking and servicing and access, the development will remove the car parking, the surface car parking that's at the site, which is around 38 spaces, and will provide at basement level a new sort of stay or hotel guest car park of a similar number, 39 spaces, I think. Within that car park, there will be disabled bays at the level of provision that's required, and EV charging bays. We had looked at options with the architect to take the access to that car park from Parr Street, with it being a less prominent street than Duke Street. But as the architect raised in the presentation, the levels on Duke Street are lower than Parr Street. So in terms of gaining access to that via a ramp, that there wasn't a possibility of having the access from Parr Street. So to try and avoid any dead space and voids on Duke Street, which is the key pedestrian linkage between the city centre, the access to the car park was narrowed and made as minimal as possible. There is one late comment to mention in relation to highways, in that I've been advised that there is an area, a very small area of adopted highway that sits within the red line, and that would need to be formally stopped up. So if the committee is minded to approve this application, I'll provide the necessary wording for that informative to be added to the decision. The applicant has agreed to pay the full Section 106 contributions that are relevant to this development, which is in relation to street trees, the art strategy, and monitoring and the city centre model. So on balance, officers are comfortable that the amendments to the design have adequately responded to concerns that have been raised during the application assessment, and we're recommending this application be approved subject to the conditions in the Section 106 that are in the report.
Thanks, Felicity. Have members got any questions or comments? Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I would, I'd start with just a general comment. I have got a question, but just a general comment is, you know, is this how we want our city to look? Twice this morning, we've seen plans for what are ostensibly large masses of blocks, grey and brown. I know the area has been a warehousing area in the past, with buildings of no real great architectural significance, although there are other buildings in the area that do have design and architectural significance about them. But wherever possible, we seem to be replacing buildings with plain blocks. You mentioned fenestration and detail earlier. I would ask a question: what aspect of detail or design lends itself in any way or has any appeal to the onlooker? What is there about this building other than it looks to me by the drawing to be a large grey block? What is it giving back in terms of culture and design?
That may be one that the architect wants to respond to, but I think there's a couple of things to respond really from my point of view, in that yes, there is a uniform materiality to this building in that it's proposing to be grey brick with the light banding detail across the entire development. The architect thought to sort of break the massing down into two kind of blocks on Duke Street and two on Parr Street, and on each of those elevations there's subtle detailing, subtle differences in the detailing to the window reveals and the horizontal banding. So a hotel by its nature is going to have a fairly uniform pattern of fenestration and window openings, but we're happy that approach gives you some differentiation between the two, but at the same time gives it an overall high quality design approach that makes it appear as a single entity. The other thing to mention is that the ground floor, and I don't know whether there were any details on the architect's slides, but at the ground floor there are some quite interesting details in terms of tiling and balustrade detailing on the Duke Street side, which has sought to kind of pick up on cues from the local area. So the architect has sought to keep the ground level both on Parr Street and Duke Street having interest that's not one uniform approach for the entire street elevation, there would be sort of 3 or 4 elements as you move along the street that have variation of detail. So that's probably as far as I can respond on that. I don't know whether the architect wants to say anything further.
Okay, thanks, Mr. T. But the architect, is it Gemma? Would you like to respond to some of the concerns raised by Councillor Lake, that this building is just, if you like, a block, a grey block? I mean, what does it bring to the city, in your opinion?
Yes, please. If we could go back to slide number 5, and I'll talk to the visuals on this slide. So the treatment of the massing has been discussed extensively, whereby it is a large site, it has a large footprint, and the overall massing has been broken down so that it doesn't present as a onerous mass or a plain block. If we could move to the 5th slide. Just the next one, please. Thank you. So after breaking down the volumes, in part you can see on the Parr Street visual to the left of the screen how we've dealt with breaking down that mass from the previous scheme submitted in terms of the scale. In terms of the facade design, we start off with quite a rigorous approach to working that facade out, and then we look at the material selections. So what might not come across in these visuals is it's a high quality brick selection, and it's a high quality stone, imitation stone that we're using, which responds to some of the detailing in the area. As Felicity said, it is reasonably subtle, the way that the characters brought out. We've got deep brick reveals embodying quality. Each of the window types has got a slight variation in its depth, material, header. The stone datums that we keep coming back to are quite finely detailed themselves. So we're using those cues from the listed building next to it and weaving them through the facade to bring out a result which isn't plain by any means, particularly in comparison to some of the earlier developments down the street, which are much simpler in their detailing. And just to touch on the ground floor, both Parr Street and Duke Street, the use of a coloured glazed brick, which is responding to materials in the area. We've taken some pattern work from 105 Duke Street and brought that into some of the bespoke metalwork detailing on Duke Street, which is introducing quite a playful and a characterful element to the design, which overall presents itself as a quality aspirational design and not by any means a monolithic slab, in our view.
Thanks for that. Councillor Maloney?
Thanks, Chair. Can I say I do wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Lake's comments on this development. And whilst I accept that the quality of materials is high in this proposal, and I note the comments about it being subtle, but I would say it is uninspiring, unless maybe it's inspired by Lego, because it is so bland and boring. And I think that the city needs more exciting design that will grab people's attention and be an asset to the city, not just a bland box that doesn't bring anything but boredom.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Maloney. Has any other members got any questions they'd like to make? No? Obviously, I mean, again, we've had another detailed presentation and quite an interesting debate, I think. Obviously, I mean, many of these planning applications and proposals are subjective, aren't they? I mean, you either like them or you dislike them. And I mean, I grew up around Duke Street, and I can remember just, you know, offices really, basically, and it is changing. But I think this is a revised scheme. A hotel in this location is acceptable. It's in line with our policies. It can bring, as it just says in the report, repair an unattractive gap site. So therefore, I'm going to move that the recommendation be approved. That agreed.
Thank you, Chair. Before I conduct a vote, do any members wish to move an amendment on the application? No? In which case, Chair, your vote, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Lake.
Against.
Thank you. And lastly, Councillor Key.
Against.
Thank you. That concludes the voting on this application. There's 5 members voting in favour, 3 members voting against, whose names and dissent will be recorded directly. Councillor Bennett was absent for part of the chamber, so not voting on this item. With the permission of committee, can I ask that we stand adjourned very briefly now for a few minutes, just to deal with some technical issues, if that's acceptable to everyone? Councillor Hanson.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Chair, through the chair, isn't this the last one was just supported, people voted against it, but isn't this another argument which says we need to collectively with our planning officers start having some training on the type of building and how can we influence our planning officers in, you know, when we get into arguments like this, but you know, it's what we want as a city, but we have to do that through the planning regime, and I just think we're missing a point at this point in time, or an opportunity rather, whereby we can get that training, get that discussion, get that debate, and understand collectively what we, as a committee and planning officers and the city want as we move forward.
I agree entirely, Councillor Hanson, yes, and we are looking to have training programmes for members of the committee on different aspects of the planning policy going forward. It's just a case of getting the capacity really and getting the training put in place, but we will do that as soon as possible. Thank you.
Can I just make a point here that I accept that training is needed, and I also accept that aesthetics is not something that we should ultimately consider as being vital in the construction of anything. But no amount of training is going to alter my opinion on whether I like the look of something or not.
It's all about being subjective, isn't it? What you like and what you don't like. I mean, you know, we've seen in the past, you know, I can remember when we were talking about, you know, waterfront developments, you know, was it the Cloud or the Blob, whatever they called it? I mean, it didn't go down well with a lot of people, but, you know, we've got what we've got, haven't we? But I think people will make their own minds up, won't they?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, we'll now be adjourning for 5 minutes, so I'll be turning off the camera and microphone system in the chamber. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
site accommodation. These buildings all face Parr Street with their entrances located onto it and are serviced by a narrow alleyway at the back known as Back Seal Street, which also services a number of bars and clubs on the opposite side. Next slide, please. There are 6 commercial units being proposed facing Parr Street and Back Colquitt Street. 3 of them are single-storey units and 3 of them are duplex units with mezzanines onto the first floor. The upper levels are mainly residential, with 70 residential apartments being proposed in a mix of 1, 2 and 3 bed apartments, and a 8-unit apart hotel element shown in light blue on the first and second floor. There are a number of setbacks, as you can see on the 5th and the 6th level, enabling the proposal to relate to the height of surrounding buildings. We're also proposing that the servicing of the development will be facilitated by Back Seal Street with a private management company operating 24 hours. There are a number of setbacks, as you can see on the 5th and the 6th, for both the commercial and residential elements. Next slide, please. It was decided early in the process, in consultation with the planning department, that the scheme should be broken down into a number of plots and not dealt with as a single entity, as is more characteristic of the row pokes, where plots aren't so large. Subsequently, it became the applicant's wish to phase the development so that construction could be started in
And we do have the architect agent here, but for questions only, really, is a Fergal, are you going to take us through this? And then we'll...
yes, Chair. Yeah, that's correct. Okay. Thanks very much. I'm conscious that the first 2 applications have taken up a lot of your time, so I'll try and go through this faster. You'll see the images in front of you relates to St. John's House, which is a Grade 2 listed building located adjoining William Brown Street Conservation Area. The application site relates to the basement, part of the ground floor, but not including Dr. Duncan's public house and the upper floors of the building. This application was last considered by yourselves back in July of 19, when you were minded to grant planning permission to convert the building into a 43-bedroom hotel, together with associated external alterations, including the relocation of fire escape and the erection of 2 single-story dormer extensions to the rear. The application is now 2 years later. The applicant is only in a position to sign the Section 106 agreement, and given the changes to National Planning Policy Framework in the interim period, together with the straightening of policies in the local plan, it was thought prudent to bring this application back to you for consideration again. There's been no alterations to the scheme in the interim period. As I said, back in July 19, you were minded to grant planning permission for the conversion of the building. This is a sensitive conversion. It still retains the integrity of the listed building. It's an appropriate location for a 43-bedroom hotel. It's subject to your officer's support, subject to the applicant signing the Section 106 agreement. There's 2 applications in front of you, the full planning permission and the associated listed building consent application. Thank you, Chair.
Do members have any questions, either for the architect or our officer? I can't see anybody indicating. Therefore, I mean, obviously, this has been before committee before in 2019. It was granted then, and it's only come back because of the time that's elapsed. So, can I move that the recommendation be approved?
Thank you, Chair. Is there any comments or motions? Amendments to the motion, either from members? No? In which case, Chair, your motion.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Prince?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Lake?
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Key?
4.
Thank you. That concludes the voting on this particular application. All members have voted in favour. Therefore, the application and its accompanying listed building consent application is approved. And we move on to our next item of business, number 8 on today's agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Item 8 is 1 Princess Road, Liverpool 8. As you recall, we deferred this at the last committee meeting for more information, basically. And we do have the agent, Fidel Jackson, who's going to give us a short presentation, and then members can ask questions if they wish.
Sorry, Chair, can I just interject there?
Sorry, Chair, I think Felicity is actually going to read through the presentation on our behalf.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I'll just interject. Yes, so there was a presentation given at the last meeting and questions asked of the agent in relation to the construction phasing programme and how existing tenants would be affected or maybe managed during that process. You'll see from the update report that's being presented today that the deferred motion was on the basis that further information be provided on those measures to protect the amenity of occupiers. And rather than the agent go through that, I think we can just advise that the information has been provided from the applicant in the form of a construction statement and 2 phasing plans. The construction statement gives 2 options for the phasing of works. The tenancies for these HMO properties run from to the summer period, so from September to the end of July. So there's a natural break in tenancies over the summer. So the proposed approach, there are 2 options. The first is to do it in a 2-phase process, which the plans you can see in front of you show. The building can effectively be partitioned into two areas for work, and so tenants could remain there would obviously be engagement in the lead up to that, so that tenants would be aware that work was going to be ongoing, and then other tenants could be offered alternative accommodation at the same price point in the location, which the developer has other properties in this area of similar accommodation. So the second option would be to do a shorter refurbishment programme over 1 year, entirely vacate the building, offer those tenants alternative accommodation, entirely vacate the building and do the refurbishment works all as one package. So I think officers are comfortable that the information that the agents provided responds to the reasons the application was deferred, and it gives 2 feasible options in which the refurbishment works could be carried out. And so it's recommended, as per the previous report presented at the last committee, that the application be approved, subject to conditions.
Okay, thanks, Felicity. Do members have any questions? Councillor Cardwell.
Yeah, I just wonder, obviously I understand the 2 options. I wonder if the developers have spoken to the existing residents and got their views on what their preferred option would be out of those 2.
I don't know whether Vidal, the applicant, wants to respond to that, but I would suggest that because this is an undetermined planning application, that once the planning application has been decided, the developer would be likely to undertake that conversation then, rather than preempt it and raise concerns at this point. But I don't know if the agent wants to make comment on that.
No, that is correct.
Is the agent there?
Hi, yes. No, what Felicity said was correct.
Councillor Prince?
No, very similar to what Councillor Cardwell's just said. I think this is a big step forward with the additional piece of information, so I'm happy with it. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Well, can I just move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Any further comments from members or amendments? No. In which case, Chair, your vote. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's just that there's an error on the note, because it's not in St Michael's Ward, it's in Princess Park Ward. So so it says Ward Councillors Tom Crone, Anarchy, Steph Pitches. That needs amending.
Thank you. That can be amended accordingly. Thank you, Councillor. Subject to that revision, are there any further comments or amendments from members? No. In which case, Chair, your vote, and a reminder to members to keep your mobiles on silent during the committee. Thank you, Chair.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Lake.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Key.
4.
Thank you. That concludes voting. Of those members eligible to vote, all members have voted in favour of the application. It is therefore approved on that basis, and we move on to our next item of business. Chair, if I may revert to you.
The next item on the agenda is item 9 and 10, St Margaret's Vicarage, 3 Princess Road, Liverpool 8, and we have no speakers for or against. Can I ask our planning officer to take us through this application, please? Stuart, are you on mute? Stuart, can you hear us? I think we've got another technical hitch, I think.
While silence is otherwise ordinarily golden, in this instance, it indicates a technical issue on the part of our planning case officer, for which I extend my apologies to committee members and those viewing the live stream today. I would just ask Stuart if he could continue to try and resolve his technical issues at this stage. I will briefly flicker through the slides on screen, and once Stuart's able to talk, we will then continue with the application. If not, we'll move to our next item of business and return to this one. Thank you.
Mike, I could present the scheme while Stuart's resolving issues if you prefer.
If you could, please, that would be much appreciated by members of the committee. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Do you want to go to the first slide, please? Okay. So this is a planning application and associated listed building consent for the refurbishment of St Margaret's Vicarage at number 3 Princess Road. And the proposal is for its use as a 14-person house in multiple occupation. The vicarage is immediately adjacent to its associated church, which is grade 2 star listed, and it's linked via an enclosed passageway The site's within the Princes Road conservation area, and it's very close to the junction with the Parliament Street. It's a red brick building. I don't know if you want to switch on to the next slide. Okay, the red brick building with Gothic detailing and has considerable presence on the street scene, although it is set back from the road, and has mature trees and garden space surrounding it. Its lawful last known use was the official residence of the St Margaret's Vicar, but it's now vacant. As you can see from the slide, the conditions information provided with the application shows that it's falling into a state of disrepair and not in great condition. The proposals are for minor alterations to the roof and relocation of a dormer and installation of a lift. So external works are very limited. There are quite a number of internal works to upgrade the accessibility of the building and make it more easy to negotiate. So there's some further photographs about with regards to the building fabric. Internally, to lay out the building as an HMO, they're proposing 2 shared kitchens, 2 communal lounges, 2 utility rooms within the lower ground floor. And then at ground first and second floors, there are either 4 or 5 bedrooms on each level, each with an ensuite bathroom, with storage space provided for shared storage space on the lower ground and at loft levels. The original proposal was for a 17-person HMO, but that was amended during the assessment process. And at 14-person HMO, there's a decent standard of accommodation with bedroom and lounge sizes that meet the council's guidance and standards, and all habitable rooms have access to natural light. The standards do advise that 3 kitchens should be provided for an HMO of this size, but because of the constraints of the building and the layout of the building, that the space standards will be met that in two larger kitchens. And so on balance, we're happy that in terms of ensuring the long-term future for this building, that would be acceptable. The concerns in relation to conservation have been addressed by the applicant through reducing the bedroom numbers, and the proposal is now supported subject to conditions relating to the protection of existing internal, external features, some of which you can see in the photographs there. I don't think there's a great deal more to say. There's no overlooking or amenity concerns in relation to neighbours. It's previously been residential, and there are some residential neighbours, but not especially close to the building. And at the city centre location, or fringe of city centre location, areas where there's already high levels of activity. It's a very sustainable location. There's no parking, 1 parking space to be provided, no other car parking. Recycle spaces would be provided. So given the location, we're comfortable that that's acceptable. There are generally low rates of car ownership amongst the HMO tenants, and bus stops and amenities within walking distance. So there has been an objection to the proposal from the Prince Park Housing Cooperative on the grounds that it's inappropriate to allow HMOs in this location, and on the lack of parking and the need to provide people with decent places to live. So we've already covered the fact that the room sizes and provision of additional spaces meets the guidance. But in respect of the appropriateness of an HMO in this location, while it's within the Article 4 area, that doesn't preclude granting consent for HMOs, which are considered to be acceptable. It just removes the ability for dwellings to change use without planning permission. So in this case, given the policy context and the fact that there are neighbouring properties in use as residential and as HMOs, the principle would be acceptable. And because it's such a large property, it's an 11-bedroom house, it's not considered that it would really genuinely have future use as a family dwelling house. It's simply too big. So on that basis, the officers are recommending approval of the application and the listed building consent application. I don't know if Stuart's able to join now, whether there's anything further you wanted to add.
I'll just check. Can you hear me now? No?
Yeah, Stuart, yes, go ahead.
You can hear me. Thank you. Sorry. Apparently it was a problem with VMware. There's very little I can add to what Felicity said, and thank you for jumping in there. As you've heard, this is very much an enabling, weighing the balance on bringing the heritage asset back into use, and it's an appropriate size and scale of building for use of the HIMO. The applicants worked with us both in heritage terms and in ensuring that there's adequate space for future occupants. So we're happy to recommend approval, Chair, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Welcome back, by the way. Do members have any questions? Councillor Prince?
It's more of a general statement than a question as such. Following on the ward councillor having his issues with this, wouldn't it? I think it's really good that we're bringing an important historic building back into use. That's the positive side. But wouldn't it have been so much better if they could have made this into 3 family units instead of, why, for example, do we have to use the loft space for an extension? Why is it going to be an HMO? Why couldn't we decide 3 to 4 bedroom family units instead? That would have been so much more fitting for the area.
Thank you, Chair. Members can only determine what's being applied for, unfortunately, and that's the HIMO. In terms of the loft extension, they put that in, and then that got, or the use of that space got removed as part of the negotiations because it wasn't fit for purpose for a habitable room. So that's just storage now. But all we can do is assess it against the policy, and if members are happy that it satisfies the policies, then it's within their gift to approve it. Unfortunately, we're not asking you to consider a different scheme, so you've got to make a decision based on what's before you, I'm afraid.
Any other members got any questions or comments? No? I think, as it's been stated, this brings a valuable building back into use. So therefore, could I move that the recommendation be approved?
Thank you, Chair. Any comments or amendments? No, in which case, Chair, your vote.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Prince?
Not voting.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Lake? Thank you. And Councillor Key?
4.
Thank you. That concludes the voting on the application. There are 7 members voting in favour, no members voting against, 1 abstention, and the application is therefore approved on that basis, as is the accompanying listed building consent application. We move on to item number 11 now. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Item 11, the former site of Liver Grease, Oil and Chemical Company, Norfolk Street, Liverpool 1. And we have Brad Wiseman, the architect and agent, who would like to give us a presentation. Brad?
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually the planning consultant, not the architect, but definitely here to give you a presentation today. Thank you for the opportunity to present today, and I'd like to take the opportunity to wish you all a happy and safe festive period. By way of background to this, in November 2019, the then members of this planning committee first considered this application, at which time it was decided that planning permission should be approved subject to the signing of a 106 agreement. As members will be aware, the signing of legal agreements can often take many months, and in this case, the occurrence of the coronavirus pandemic and its impact on the hospitality sector meant continued and repeated delays. By the time the applicant came to engross the 106 agreement, the council's planning policy background had substantially moved on, with progress being made on the local plan and the Baltic SRF. And as a result, your officers advised that the development, which had been approved by members, no longer accorded with policy and would need to be redetermined, which is why we're here today. The site is located in the heart of the Baltic Triangle and is sandwiched between 2 ongoing residential developments. I think you can see on the screen now, the site to the west, which is known as Baltic View, will provide 130 apartments over 9 stories. And the site to the east, which is known as the Vault, is being progressed by Taurus for 64 affordable apartments, also over 9 stories. As members are no doubt aware, the Baltic Triangle is a dynamic mixed-use environment. The adoption of the Baltic SRF in August 2020 was intended to guide the redevelopment of the Baltic area to ensure it retains its special character and blend of uses. The site is itself located in an allocated mixed-use area within which the proposed hotel use is wholly acceptable. Your officers agree that the proposal will diversify the visitor accommodation offer in what is a popular area of the city, making a valuable contribution to the local economy and providing enhanced employment prospects. Could we just skip to the next slide, please? We've just included this slide to show the ground floor area of the proposed building. You can see at the top of the screen there is Norfolk Street, where the site will be accessed through to the lobby. At the bottom of the street there of the slide, sorry, is Brick Street, and you can see the car park of the building, which is accessed from Norfolk Street, one-way system through to Brick Street there. Next slide, please. The building, which members were previously minded to approve, stood at a maximum of 11 stories in height, which obviously stood above the two adjacent developments. As the adopted Baltic SRF introduced new guidance relating to proposed building heights, the development was revised in order to lower the height of the building so that it now lies in keeping with neighbouring development. As noted by your officers, the design of the building otherwise remains in keeping with the development which members were minded to grant permission for in November 2019. Next slide, please. Thank you. Whilst it is acknowledged by the applicant and your officers that the proposed building is of a height which is greater than as is anticipated in the SRF, the form of the development is in keeping with the appearance of the immediate surroundings within the Baltic Triangle. If the proposal were to rigidly adhere to the guidance provided in the Baltic SRF, which notably is guidance only, a viable hotel scheme would not be possible at this site. Moreover, a substantially smaller building in this location would appear quite jarring and disjointed at street level, given it is, as previously mentioned, located between two 9-storey buildings. The proposed hotel scheme will complete the development of this Baltic Triangle block and will result in numerous benefits, which include the regeneration of a vacant and derelict site, which is currently an oddity in the street scene, provision of approximately 67 full-time equivalent employment positions, which generate approximately 1.2 million in annual revenue, positive investment in the Baltic Triangle in response to interest from internationally recognised hotel operators, a contribution to the provision of street trees and public art within the city, support from all of the council's planning, highways and design officers, and a contribution to the evolving mixed-use nature of the Baltic Triangle area. In our view, the proposed scheme successfully balances the existing and evolving form of the Baltic Triangle area with the emerging and adopted planning policy background in order to produce a high-quality scheme which will be to the benefit of the local area. And it's for all of those reasons that we'd ask that members support the conclusion of your officers and grant permission today for this proposal in line with the conclusions of this committee from November 2019. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Key?
So I just have one question regarding the councillor's comments. So if approved, full section 106 is requested for the Baltic Hub green space. Are there any doubts that the section 106 will not be paid in full?
Brad, do you want to answer that question, or I can bring in our planning officer?
Thank you, Chair. I can answer that question to the best of my ability. Obviously, if approved, the section 106 will need to be completed, and it will require the payment of those contributions at various points in the development process, primarily at the commencement of development or occupation of the building. So there's no doubt that those contributions will be made at the trigger points which are specified in the 106 agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson?
It's just a comment here. Councillor Mumby and his colleagues put that request on every 106 application that comes through this committee, so there's no concern. Just that the earmarking that whatever money's there should be spent in their area.
Thanks for that clarification, Councillor Hanson. Okay. Are there any other questions from members? No, then can I bring in our planning officer to summarise this application, please?
Chair, thank you very much. And just to clarify Councillor Key's query, yes, the full section 106 of just short of £59,000 would be payable. The actual where that money will be spent is not decided at this stage, but as I said, full section 106 is proposed. Chair, and members of the committee, you first considered this application back in November 19, where you resolved to grant planning permission. As is the case with all applications where the section 106 hasn't been signed, it's a requirement to come back to planning committee and reassess the application against planning policies that have materialised in the interim period. In this particular instance, there's been a significant change in terms of planning policy. The Baltic SRF has gained significant weight in the interim period and is a material consideration in the determination of planning applications. As part of the Baltic SRF, what it tries to do is it defines appropriate building heights according to the street widths. So in terms of Norfolk Street and Brick Street, where this development block sits within, it allocates kind of parameter building height 1.5 times the street width. In relation to Norfolk Street, that would be approximately 16.5 metres in height, whereas Brick Street, which is the narrow of the two streets, equates to a width of 12.75 metres in height. The presentation is quite rightly identified. This development sits within two existing blocks which are under construction in one case, and in the second instance is almost completed. Both these blocks are significantly higher than if you apply the kind of test within the Baltic SRF in terms of street height. In this instance, the applicant, the planning officer, has negotiated a number of reductions in height, which are detailed within the report, which reduce the height of the development by some 3.5 metres in height, or approximately 1 storey. In this instance, the development would still sit higher than the parameters within the Baltic SRF, but in this instance, we've adopted a pragmatic approach. Given that the two adjoining sites are almost completed, it's considered that a reduction in height, but one that does not accord with the parameters of the SRF, is appropriate in this particular instance. The full rationale behind the officer's recommendation is detailed within the report. So, Chair, this revised scheme is your officer's support subject to the stated conditions and the applicant signing the Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thanks, Fergal. Do members have any questions? No? Okay. As has been to committee before and agreed, I think I'm going to move that the recommendation be approved.
Thank you, Chair. Any comments or amendments? No, in which case, Chair, your vote.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson.
4. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Councillor Prince.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney. 4. Thank you, Councillor Lake.
4.
Thank you, and Councillor Key.
4.
Thank you. That concludes voting on this application. The voting is unanimous and the application approved on that basis, subject to appropriate legal agreements. We move on to item number 12 now, related to number 6 and 6A, Wallet Road in Princess Park, Liverpool 8. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mike. Can I invite John Atkinson, the architect agent, to address the committee?
Yeah, good morning.
Morning.
Is the slide, there we go. Okay, so good morning everyone. Situated on 6 and 6 Alderwood Road are two buildings, what we have called the Mansion House and Garden House for ease of distinction. Currently operating as a neglected HMO, our proposal's main driver is to improve on the type of accommodation, offering adequate parking, cycle storage and waste and recycling facilities for the residents. In regards to the matter of parking, the Highways Department do have their own policies that we adhere to. However, the hard landscaping has been reduced from previous revisions to achieve the balance between practicality for parking and usable garden space for the residents. Working closely with the arboricultural specialist, we have discovered that unfortunately a number of trees within the grounds were deemed unsafe or nearing the end of their life expectancy. Therefore, in order to maintain the green landscape of the site, we have proposed the removal of the trees shown with the replacement of the necessary species following input from the tree officer. To address any concerns about this strategy, as was explained to us by the arboricultural consultant, the alternative to leave these trees in place would mean in the very near future, when these trees come to the end of their lifespan, they would become unsafe, becoming a risk to the residents, the building and the neighbouring properties. Additionally, they also lose the means to photosynthesize. So therefore, to give approval to this scheme would subsequently mean granting the needed maintenance of the foliage within the site, along with new planting, which will provide a healthy and sustainable treescape for decades to come. Next slide, please. So the Mansion House contains 4 apartments at ground floor, situated around the central lobby of the building, and another 4 apartments at first floor, with a final apartment located at 2nd floor. With the varying occupancy rates of the apartments, this provides accommodation for 18 residents in this part of the scheme. Next slide, please. The Garden House contains 6 apartments split over 2 floors, with the first floor apartments designed with balconies to flood them living quarters with light and offering a private outdoor space for the residents. Much like the Mansion House, the varying occupancy rates of the apartments provides accommodation for 16 residents in this part of the scheme, creating 34 available residencies in total. Next slide, please. So, as previously mentioned, a key driver in the design was to better the accommodation standard, but along with this was to also respect the existing envelope of the Mansion House and reinstate any historical aspects that may have been lost over time. I suppose this is most evident where we've carefully designed the layout around the apartments. Carefully designed the layout of the apartments around the existing windows. Next slide, please. And as the Garden House is nestled away in the grounds of the site, displaying much less architectural merit, we've opted for a more contemporary approach with large expanses of glass and, as I mentioned before, private balconies. And all in all, we believe our design will bring a new lease of life to this property and add to the ongoing gentrification of the L8 area. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Do members have any questions? No? Therefore, can I ask the officer, we've got no one speaking against this, so can I invite the planning officer to summarise this application, please?
Thank you, Chair. Felicity Collins again, Post Officer for this application. I think the architect just run through the scheme there, which is the application is for a conversion of 2 existing HMO properties, which currently provides 22 bedrooms, and the proposal would be to convert this into 14 residential apartments. This would be 8 one-bed apartments and 6 two-bed apartments. And in respect of our policy in relation to affordable housing, the applicant has committed to making 3 of those, which is over the 20% required by the policy for available for shared ownership affordable housing. The architects just run through the alterations to the buildings which are proposed on the Mansion House, which is obviously one of the original villas, which are typical of that stretch of Alderwood Road. The alterations are minimal and would secure the longer term use of this and refurbishment of this building, which makes a positive contribution to the conservation area. And in relation to the garden house, which, as was said in the presentation, officers are comfortable that those interventions would be appropriate and would uplift the quality of the building. In respect of neighbouring amenity issues, obviously both buildings are currently in use as HMOs and have residential neighbours, so there's an existing relationship there. Where new windows are proposed at the first floor on the garden house, the architect dealt with the interface issues by angling the windows so that they're not directly facing windows of the adjacent house, which is apartment building at number 4 Allet Road. In respect to the tree removal, I think the plans shown there by the architect and the presentation given has run through that. We've been through very detailed conversations on this site because obviously we want to retain as much of that garden space and retain as many mature trees as possible, which would be in accordance with our policies. And we received one objection from Councillor Crone in relation to loss of the garden space and trees within the site. So the tree removal has actually been very carefully discussed in order that the trees being removed are those which are nearing the end of their life or solely those that need to be removed adjacent to the garden house, which are smaller specimens in any case. And the proposed replacement has been agreed with the tree officer as larger semi-mature species that are appropriate for the location that would actually secure a positive contribution in terms of the planting at the boundaries of the site and replace any of the sort of screening and amenity value loss through the proposed removals. I would just add that there was one condition that should have been on the report, which is relating to the developer agreeing works within the root protection areas prior to commencement on site. So if committees are minded to approve this application, I'll provide the wording for that condition to the committee services. The applicant has agreed, in addition to the affordable housing, has agreed to pay the standard Section 106 contribution in relation to open space, street trees, art strategy and monitoring. In principle, the scheme supported and the detail of the scheme has been assessed to be found to be acceptable, and officers support it for those reasons. So unless there's any other questions.
Thanks, Felicity. Members have any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Any comments or amendments from members, please? No? In which case, Chair, your vote.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Cardwell.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Prince.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Lake.
4.
Thank you, and Councillor Key.
4.
Thank you, colleagues. That concludes voting on this application, and the application is approved unanimously by those present and voting. We now move on to our next item of business. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Item 13, which is 13 to 21 Seal Street, Liverpool 1. And we have the agent, Vidal Jackson. Are you going to give a presentation to the committee, Mr. Jackson?
We were made aware by Fergal that he is going to take the presentation through for you today.
Fergal.
Chair, yeah, thank you very much. Vidal, I think, is just here to answer members of any queries or not. This should be a small presentation, yeah, if you hold that for the moment. That's the proposed, the application side sits to the right-hand side of the picture. The proposal is to use the first floor of an existing building as a nightclub and drinking establishment and to carry out associated physical work. including providing openings onto the first floor external terrace facing onto Seal Street and the erection of a pergola, which you can see in the top part of the photograph. The remainder of the existing building accommodates 5 other licensed premises, which have terminal operating hours between 2:30 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. It's proposed to operate this premises between the hours of 0800 hours and 4 a.m. The application premises were previously used as a comedy club. A number of objections have been received to the application, with numbering 10 in total, which are detailed within the report. To help address these concerns, amendments have been made to the application. So the use of the external terrace area, which was originally proposed to have at 4 a.m. up closing time, would now shut at 11 p.m. and all activity then would be confined within the building itself. And a higher screen would also be installed in the front of the facade adjoining the parapet. That is to kind of screen any activity and form a noise buffer between the application side and the opposite side of Seal Street. So the building accommodates a big number of licensed premises, all which operate up till 4:30 a.m. This application proposes 4 a.m. terminal operating hours. It was previously used as a comedy club which had food and beverage offerings. So it's a use that is entirely appropriate within the Seal Street area, and your planning officers have imposed a number of restrictions which lessen the impact of the development on the wider community in and around Seal Street. And it's for these reasons that application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions. Thank you.
Thanks, Fergal. Do members have any questions, either for the agents or Sir Fergal? No? Well, can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Similar process for previous applications. Any comments or amendments from members? No? In which case, Chair, your vote.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Cardwell.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Prince.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Maloney.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Lake.
4.
Thank you, and lastly, Councillor Key.
4.
Thank you. That concludes voting. The application is approved unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Can we move on now to our next item, which is item 14, 43 Timwall Hill, Liverpool 13. And we have Catherine Kavanagh, who's going to present this. It's a change in conditions 6 and 7. Catherine. Catherine, are you on mute? We can't hear you.
Hi, I'm applying for this on behalf of Liverpool Children's Services. The Planning Committee has already approved the change of use for the property to be used as a children's home. So this application is just severely condition 6 and 7. Some background to the application is that Liverpool has a legal duty to apply suitable accommodation for children who are no longer able to live with their families. Currently, the council relies on external providers for this, which does come at a high cost, and we have no control over the quality of care that's provided. Many of these placements are often outside the Liverpool boundary. When children are separated from their parents, it does cause considerable trauma, and this is often compounded when they have to move away from the home. Next slide, please. The children remaining in Liverpool has lots of benefits for them. They're able to stay close to their birth families, and it provides reassurance knowing that they don't have to travel far to see them. They can maintain their friendships outside the school and within school, which has a positive impact on their mental health. They don't have to suffer any disruptions to their education unnecessarily, and if needed, the social workers are able to visit them more regularly. They have access to specialist health services and obviously can take advantage of the wide range of activities on offer in the city. Next slide, please. The current condition of condition 6 does not allow us to operate the home as a 4-bedroom children's home at the moment, and it would impact on our Ofsted registration. We're asking for the condition to be changed to allow 8 staff on the premises, not including handovers or team meetings. The reason for this is that there will be 2 to 3 residential workers caring directly for the children, but there will also be a manager, a senior and a general assistant on site at times. So when there's a changeover of staff, then they would exceed the 3 staff that are currently part of that condition. The handovers take place at the beginning of each shift, so that's the morning, the afternoon and the night time. This condition will have most impact at the afternoon when it's 2:30 p.m. handover, when there may be more than 8 people on site. This won't be every single day. It's usually between Monday and Friday, but at times the manager will be off site at meetings and the general assistant only works part-time. So we don't foresee this to be every single day. With regard to the team meetings, they take place 1 to 2 times per month. All staff are invited to these meetings except for those who are on nights or, taking some leave. The team meetings will take place on site, off site and virtually. With regards to the number of staff working directly with the children, we obviously want it to be safe for the children, so we want to have some flexibility, and our decision making needs to be based on what's in the best interest of that child and the rest of the children. So we just want the condition to allow 8 people so that we can make decisions based on the children and not worrying about breaching the actual planning conditions. Some of those staffing ratios will be changed. That includes reducing the staffing numbers when we think it's okay to do so, and when there's unforeseen circumstances, for when children need to go to hospital or education meetings are organised at short notice, or if we receive any information from the police or people in the local area that causes us a concern around safety. Next slide, please. With regards to condition 7, this is a list of shift patterns that are in place for the staff. We feel it would be beneficial to adjust the shift pattern so that we could incorporate a longer shift, particularly at weekends and school holidays when the children have more time to do activities and, maybe seeing family members. By incorporating this shift pattern as well, it will reduce the number of handovers and the number of staff that are on site on them particular days. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Do members have any questions? Councillor Maloney.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I wonder, would it be possible to have an explanation of why these conditions were imposed originally, please? Thanks, Chair.
I don't know whether we'll bring our planning officer maybe to answer that, if that's okay. Is Victoria?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, in relation to the councillor's question then, at the time of the application, it was understood that it would purely be residential workers on the site without the knowledge of sort of having a general manager, a cleaner domestic and a senior member of staff. So at the time of, time of the application, that's what was considered, and we can only consider what's in front of us at that time.
Thank you, Victoria. Any other members?
Can I just, as a ward councillor for the area, can I just make a couple of comments just to say that I feel that one of the reasons that these amendments have been made is really indicative of the awful approach to the planning of the development, to be set with problems and lack of communication and all kinds of stuff that we don't need to go into now. But I think the change is indicative of all the mistakes that were made in the beginning. But what I would like to say is I would like to commend Councillor Fraser-Lake and Kate and Steve Reddy and the rest of the team who, on this occasion and prior to this amendment, took the steps to consult with local councillors and with the community. And I think that was a massive step forward in terms of improving the understanding of this home. And certainly it won our support. We believe that the changes in staff will only lend to improvement at the home and greater care for the residents.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lake. Councillor Prince?
Similar to what Councillor Lake has just said, I think these changes are absolutely essential. If there has been a problem showing some recent issues, some recent cases, it's been things like not sharing information with the team. So the team meetings are essential. The handover is another situation where information may not be shared properly. So the necessary staff are in these figures. These changes are absolutely essential, in my opinion, and have my full support.
Are there any other questions from members? No? Okay. A local resident who wants to speak against this application. Raymond, are you there? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, lovely. My name is Ray Turner. I'm representing the residents. We had over 60 people attend the meeting pre-COVID, all strongly objecting to the proposals. I'd like to point out that no one objects to the aims to provide care for these children. We object to that this property is not suitable, and it never has been suitable. And it's amazing it's gone to where it is so far. It's a 4-bedroom house in a cul-de-sac. Now, the conditions that they're applying for now, 6 and 7, as Councillor previously mentioned, are indicative that this property should never have been used in this way for these children. There's 15 points I want to make that have been raised by the residents, and I'm going to read these out very, very quickly within the time frame I've got. The Liverpool Unitary Development Plan, the UDP, states that the council will ensure a residential care home will not affect the amenity of existing local residents. Well, it does. And semis are only appropriate where both properties are part of the development. That's not the case. That's not the case at all. There is a statutory document and material. This is a statutory document and planning material consideration. The fact that is detailed in the UDP previously accepts that residents of the adjoining properties and residents in this cul-de-sac are going to be affected by the disturbance, and it's going to be ongoing and ongoing and ongoing, and more so at weekends. This was a detailed consideration during the initial application, which resulted in the conditions being applied, taking into consideration the feeling of the residents and the impact it's going to have on the residents. The proposed use of the property and the number of people and cars going to and from the property is far in excess of what is expected of a 4-bedroom family home in a cul-de-sac. It is also significantly above the considered by the head of planning to be the maximum required to protect residential amenities. Based on the shift patterns, there will be staff going on every day at 7 a.m, 7:30, 8 a.m, 9 a.m, 2:30 p.m, 3 p.m, 4:30 p.m, 9:45 p.m, and 10 p.m, as handovers will be excluded from the limit of personnel on the property. There will be no limit on the number of people in the property during these times, which is a significant proportion of every day. The increase in the number of personnel for handovers at quieter times of the day, early morning, at night, and at weekends, will be far more noticeable and disruptive to the nearby residents. The property does not have adequate parking to accommodate the increase in staff or team meetings, which means a lot of street parking, and this will cause further impact on the local residents. Tynwald Hill is a cul-de-sac where typical vehicle movement is less than on a through road. So any increase in numbers in this property is going to be acutely felt by the residents. As a number of the personnel will be flexible, the impact on residential amenity cannot be fully assessed. The applicant states that the conditions do not fit in with the management plan. This is the plan reviewed as part of the original application and resulted in the head of planning restricting the number of staff. What has changed apart from, you know, the realization that this property is not suitable, which is why we're now having these changes proposed. The property is not suitable, and these proposed changes are going to disrupt the community in Tynwald Hill as a cul-de-sac. The council has an obligation to protect the quality of life of local residents. The head of planning decided that these conditions were required to protect the quality of life. Why is this no longer worthy of protection? This would not be approved if it was not a council application. The residents are looking for support from the council. We're wondering, what else do we need to do to protect our community? We see in our community eroded and eroded. And the 60-odd residents who attended the meeting are from all political parties. And we're all wondering, where else to go? What can we do for the council to come and support us and help us in our community? We do care about the children. We do care that they have a quality of care. But this property is not suitable and never has been.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Turner. Can I now bring in, hang on, I'm going to bring our planning officer in. Victoria, do you want to make any responses to some of the concerns that have been raised by Mr. Turner? But however, we have already approved the planning application. We're here today simply to look at the changes asked for in conditions 6 and 7. We're not here really to go through the whole application once again, are we? I'll bring council.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, you're correct. The principle of development has already been established earlier this year. So this application is solely to assess conditions 6 and 7 and the variation to them conditions. So a lot of what Mr. Turner has said are in relation to the principle of development. However, it is noted, and it's noted within the officer's report, that we do consider that there will be an increase in activity. We haven't said there won't, and that may be above what is usually associated with a dwelling house, a family dwelling house. However, we don't think it's going to have any undue adverse impact on the amenity afforded to those existing residents. And I understand Mr. Turner's got concerns around car parking, and I think Andy might be able to address that in a second. And then in terms of the day-to-day running of the care home, I mean, I don't know whether Catherine wants to come back in and say a bit more over around the handover shifts. But my understanding is this application has come back because of Ofsted conversations with LCC, and I think it is important to remember that this is going to be the children's home. It's not sort of a hospital that you know, that you've got to have people there 24/7, and there's going to be all kinds of noise and disturbance all hours of the day. In the statement provided by Catherine, it basically said it is a children's home, so they will have bedtimes, they will have to go to school, and they will do everything that is expected of children in terms of that. So yeah, that's it in terms of Mr. Turner's comments.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. I'll bring in Councillor Maloney, and then I'll ask Catherine to come back and maybe answer any points that have been raised by either Mr Turner or Councillor Maloney. Councillor Maloney.
Thanks, Chair. A few questions, if I may. Can I ask how many car parking spaces are available on the property? Also, the age of the children, and are they long-term residents at the home, or is it more a transitional type home? Thanks, Chair.
Catherine, could you answer those points, please?
Yes, no problem. The age of the children is between 8 and 17. The plan is for children to live at the home medium to long term. So as the planning officer said, you know, it is about making it a home for the children, having routines and boundaries in place, trying to support them, you know, to have it, you know, for their future, really, educating them. With regards to the car parking spaces, within the front part of the house, there's probably 2 to 3 car parking spaces, and then the road just in front there would be, you know, maybe 1 or 2 spaces there. We have not recruited the staff team at the moment, so I couldn't say how many people are going to drive and stuff, so I wouldn't know how many, you know, spaces staff would need, really.
Okay, thank you. Any other members have got any questions, comments? Okay, well, notwithstanding, you know, the concerns raised by Mr Turner, obviously the children's home has already been granted permission, and I think for me anyway, the children's safety is our #1 priority. So I'm going to move that the recommendation be approved. Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Any further comments or amendments from members of the committee, please? No? In which case, Chair, your vote.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Lake.
Abstain.
Thank you. And Councillor Key, who's no longer here, so that concludes our voting. Of those members present and voting, 7 members have voted in favour, and we have 1 abstention. The application is therefore approved on that basis, and those additional conditions are applied. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Can we move on to our next application, which is number 15 on the agenda, 125 Alderwood Avenue, Liverpool, L24, and we have no speakers for or against. And can I ask our case officer, Felicity, to come in and summarise this application, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's going to be myself, not Felicity, dealing with this one. You've got a detailed report in front of you, and the proposal is a resubmission of a very similar scheme that was granted consent in 2018, but which has now expired. The site's located in a neighbourhood parade that has a number of uses, including 3 hot food takeaways, as well as a number of vacant units. Neighbourhood parades are considered to be appropriate locations in principle for such uses, and there is no cumulative impact threshold for such uses within neighbourhood parades. It's considered that the use of a vacant unit will not undermine the wider function of the neighbourhood parade, and that little has changed in policy terms or on the ground since the last grant of consent in 2018 in specific relation to neighbourhood parades and what's acceptable within them. The proposed opening hours until 11 p.m. at night are considered to be in keeping with other uses within the parade and also in line with the requirements of the local plan. The premises is also more than 400 metres distant from any secondary school. The proposed extraction flue will be of an appropriate height and design so as not to have a detrimental impact on the amenity of nearby occupiers, and conditions are proposed requiring waste to be kept within the premises at all times. The applicants have submitted a crime prevention management strategy plan, which seeks to install security cameras, and a condition will also be imposed requiring the use of security lighting to minimise and deter ASB. Such measures are considered to be reasonable for premises of this type. The police were consulted on the application but have not made any comments. Given the presence of existing late night uses and the proposed security measures proposed, it's considered that an additional hot food takeaway will not result in a level of disturbance that would be so significant over and above that which may already exist. In terms of highways and vehicular movements, the site's got a lay-by in front of it, and these premises or this type of use tends to attract foot-borne traffic, and therefore any vehicular movements are not considered to be likely to have any wider impact on the local area. So in light of that, Chair, and given the previous history and that nothing's changed in policy terms for neighbourhood parades since 2018, we're happy to recommend the application for approval, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Stuart. Do members have any questions, comments? No? Can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Any comments? I'll invite your vote, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cardwell.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Maloney.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Lake.
4.
Thank you. That concludes the voting on this application, and the application is carried unanimously by those members present and eligible to vote. In relation to our final item of business, can I please advise everyone that the agents acting on behalf of the applicant for this particular tree proposal is unfortunately experiencing technical difficulties today and has requested that the committee defer consideration of this report to our 18th of January meeting, if that's agreeable to everyone, in which case this will make this our last item of business, and I'll invite the Chair to make his closing comments. Thank you.
Is that agreed by members of the committee that we defer this last item to the 18th of January? Well, obviously it's been in many ways a really stressful year, hasn't it? You know, and hopefully, you know, things will improve next year, and we will get rid of this dreaded coronavirus pandemic. But I mean, can I just thank all the members for their contributions during the year. I think we have had our moments where we've disagreed, but hopefully we can still be constructive and treat each other with respect, which is important. And I'd just like to wish every body, including Mike, who's one of our most hard-working officers, I've got to say, and wish Mike and all the members a very, very happy Christmas, and let's hope that the new year brings us all good fortune and best wishes for the new year.